Hey, Uist You community and listeners. This is Julie, and I am so happy you're here. I'm so excited that you get to listen in on this conversation today. It's going to go deep, and we're going to get really into some amazing conversation around how to deal with change and how to be your best self and all kinds of things that I know you're going to love. I just want to remind you, if you haven't already done so, hop on over to the youistyou.com, join the community. I have some awesome free downloadable worksheets. Would love to have you to be part of the community and also get the weekly emails that tells you about all of the amazing podcast episodes. All right, so let me tell you about our guest today. I am so excited to interview and get for you to learn about Michael Diettrich-Chastain. Michael is an author. He is a speaker. He's a professional coach and consultant. He is founder and CEO of ARC Integrated, an organizational consulting and professional coaching practice in Asheville, North Carolina. Note, one of my favorite places on the planet. And through a focus on emotional intelligence, leadership, and communication, ARC Integrated empowers individuals and organizations to achieve optimum performance in their work and in their life. So this is for everybody, not just for those with a career, but also for anybody in their life. And as a consultant, Michael has helped organizational leaders and teams improve employee engagement, productivity, culture, retention, sales, and ultimately the organization's bottom line. He has facilitated trainings on leadership, change management, team building, communication, emotional intelligence, employee engagement, and self-care, as well as many other topics. He is a professional coach, and he's worked with clients to reduce stress. So if you've dealt with stress, Michael is awesome at dealing with that as a coach. He also coaches others in improving work-life balance and enhancing leadership skills. Michael's writing can be seen on Live Strong, Time, Money, Monster, About Entrepreneur, and the Washington Post. He wrote his first book, Changes, The Busy Professional's Guide to Reducing Stress, Accomplishing Goals, and Mastering Adaptability. And it is now also on Amazon in the audiobook format, which I'm a huge fan of. Michael also, just to get a sense of him, enjoys hiking and traveling and reading and listening to podcasts. And he's been studying and teaching at a martial arts school for more than 15 years. He incorporates philosophies from martial arts studies into his work with individuals and organizations. You can find out a lot more about Michael, both on the show notes and also about what he does and his coaching and his team at arcintegrated.com. All right. So we are ready to dive in. Michael, I'm so excited to have you here today.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much, Julie.
All right. So there's a lot here that you do. A lot of words, things that I start to think about, I want to talk about. But first, I always like this question around, what does it mean to you to be your most authentic self, to be your Uist You? And then maybe we can get a little bit into how you've kind of built into this business that you've created.
I think this question of your Uist You, I love it. And I like to think about that as an ever evolving scenario. And so, when I think about like myself 10 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined being where I am today and doing what I'm doing, and both in work and in personal. And so I think about, this question of who's the Uist You as being a kind of a living document, like a continuous question to ask ourselves. Are we being congruent with, our hopes and our desires and our strengths and our passion and vision? And so I guess I like that idea of critically evaluating from one phase of life to the other of, are we being our Uist You right now?
I love what you just said, and I agree. And it occurred to me, so for those who are watching YouTube, I'll make sure at the end, because I have your book, I realize, and your awesome cards, I'll make sure to just show people, because I love it. I love the colors. I love what you did. And it felt very your Uist You. And I just, what you said that I think is so important is that the idea of it being a living document with that it's not like a destiny you reach. It's constant inquiry, question. Am I in alignment with values, with my strengths, with my visions? And and if so, great. And if not, how can I shift that? I'm totally with you with that. I think it's a great.
Yeah, yeah. And part of the reason I say that is because I think that changes for us over time. What's
Yes.
important to us, what our strengths are, what we want to see for our life, both work and personal. That may change from year to year, from phase to phase. And so important question to continue to ask ourselves.
Yeah, I actually, so my question to you is, I'm curious, has there been a time maybe where you weren't as in alignment with your values or goals, or you realized the path you were going on, the direction you were heading in was not exactly where you wanted to be? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I find many times we have things like that which help us to get back on track.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and probably many times over the course of my life, but there's definitely a pivotal moment that comes to mind. And if it's okay, I'll tell a little bit of my background story to get to that pivotal
Yeah,
moment. Yeah.
please.
So I'll back up to college, which during that time I was on this very serious trajectory for a master's or PhD in industrial organizational psychology, and which I'm sure a lot of your listeners know about. For those that don't, it's this idea of looking at systems of people within organizations or businesses and understanding how do the systems of people impact the effectiveness of the business, right? And so I did all the coursework in college for that and had this vision in mind. So out of college, got a corporate job and was doing a lot of account management, a lot of career coaching, some sales, some leadership consultation, and it was really great experience. And then through that, had this kind of like desire, curiosity around taking a deeper dive in human development. And so
Mm.
went back and got a master's in counseling and then a license as a psychotherapist, and lived in that world for a number of years. And I'm still a huge supporter of therapy and the good work that it does. And I got a ton of experience in that world, from doing private practice to working in community mental health to working with teams of therapists. I was a leader for a number of teams, worked in the hospital system, the jail system.
Oh,
It
wow.
was just very diverse and super educational and interesting. Got to work with a wide variety of challenges that people face, both professionally and personally, which gets me to this moment of pivot to your question, which was toward, I guess, the end of 2012, 2013, really had this itch to do something different again and wanted to shift back to doing corporate work. I still had this interest in organizations and teams and leadership, but was also really passionate about mental health and the system and doing that work. And so it was really a conflicted time in my life. I knew that it was time for a change, but was resistant and totally didn't have really a clue about how to go about doing it, because I was I had created a whole career, had a license, was very much in my career already as a therapist. And so
Wow.
so that's the long answer to your question, Julie, about a time when I was uncertain and needed to make re-identify
Yeah.
who I was.
So I can imagine those listening, we've just have had different maybe versions of that, right? Like realizing, okay, the path I'm on is not exactly the path I want to continue on, or realizing I have more energy and passion over here. How did you, and I know you've written about change. You have these incredible cards, which I'll show in a little bit if you're watching on YouTube, these awesome cards that I love of yours about how to deal with change. Like, how did you deal with change in this? And how did you honor your truth in this situation?
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about a lot with clients is this intersection between professional life and personal life, and that this compartmentalization that we sometimes can do as people doesn't really serve us, right? And that there is always a crossfire that's going on between who we are as people, what's our human experience, and our professional life. And the reason I start with that is because in combination with this period of my life, I was also going through a really, really hard separation with a partner that I thought was going to be a lifelong partner. And so what was good about that is that it inspired and motivated and pushed me to
Mm-hmm.
make a change. And so in answer to your question, one of the things I did was I changed my geography. And so I moved from where I was living across the country, and then
Mm-hmm.
really just kind of started to explore, my network, and got really involved in a lot more reading, a lot more podcast listening, just devouring content in every form, in
Yeah.
addition to leveraging my network to try and determine what is either a sidestep or some kind of some kind of pivot that could be made to get me from what I was doing professionally to the corporate work that I wanted to do again.
So it sounds like, I mean, goodness, if you're also going through the ending of, you said, a relationship with a partner that could have been a lifelong partner, it sounds like you were really in an inflection point
Mm-hmm.
of, and I like what you said. Like, it sounds like for you, changing geography and then just kind of immersing yourself in, learning and positive information that could help you. I mean, it sounds like you really created almost this like specialized environment for yourself.
Yeah, yeah, completely. The other thing that comes to mind as uncertain and challenging as that time was,
Yeah.
there was also a mindset that I had. I was very convinced that I could make something happen differently professionally in my life, even though at the time I had no clue how to go about it.
Yeah.
And so I say that because I just, time and time again, I see that in the clients that we serve, in my own life and lives of those that are close to me, that our mindset has so much of an impact on our ability to navigate change process.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. So I'm just going to show, if you're watching, I love your book, and I love, I'm big into trees and roots, and I love so changes, the H has this like tree. It looks like a tree. It really looks like roots at the bottom. And then on the end is like the tree that's springing up. I love the visual. I'm wondering, I know there's a lot in here, but I think
Yeah.
something that many human beings struggle with is how to navigate change. And I
Uh-huh.
know you've written about it. And I'm just wondering, maybe just to pull out some of the key actionable items or other takeaways, anything we haven't talked about that could help my amazing community to navigate change, whether it's career, personal, whatever it might be. I think that can be very, very unsettling for people if they don't have
Yeah,
a framework.
absolutely, absolutely. And I'll start again with a little bit of a story to get us to this point of
Yeah,
change
bring it on. I love
navigation.
stories. We love
All
stories.
right. So to fast forward from that pivot point that I was in to now, I did find a great job in, doing corporate work again, and then eventually started my own company. And now we focus on peak performance for teams, leaders, and cultures of organizations. And, we travel around quite a bit, and we do a lot of great work around emotional intelligence, around communication, around culture building. And I say that because I've seen human change exist in a wide spectrum, from
Yeah.
those that barely get their human needs met, to those
Mm,
struggling with severe and persistent mental health issues, to those going through like various kinds of life circumstantial things like divorce or moving or changing careers or death or birth, to those working in a more kind of structured organizational sense, leadership, team conflict, things of that nature. I say all that to say that I've seen people create a lot of different kinds of change. And a few years ago, I started asking myself this question of all the thousands of clients that I've worked with, what are the common factors, regardless of the content of the change?
yeah.
What are the common factors that always seem to come up through the work that we do? And so if you can imagine like a spreadsheet that has a series of words across the top, right? And then synonyms or synonym words kind of coming down, right? So I started to kind of just explore or kind of brainstorm with myself, could there be an acronym for these seven kind of human experiences that I landed on that could be a helpful reminder for people? So as I was exploring what are these common factors, landed on 7, looked at this spreadsheet, had hundreds of words, and funny enough, landed on the acronym changes for the 7 dimensions that always seem to be relevant when moving through a change process.
Mhm.
And so I say all that, Julie, to make the point that, whenever we're working through a difficult change, or even one that's maybe not so difficult, that it is so important to look at these various aspects, these 7 important aspects of our lived human experience, because they will be the things that will either propel us forward or stunt our growth or inhibit us from creating the change that we want professionally or personally.
So cool. So brilliant. All right. So let's go into them. I have them in the cards. Like, I know we've got,
Right.
I don't want to give it away. I want you to go through it, but I noticed that. I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. And they make sense to me. Can you walk us through the 7? And I always say, if you're listening and you're driving, don't take notes. We'll have them in the show notes. Like, don't do that.
Yeah. Don't watch the road, people.
Yeah. Don't drive and and right. I've done it
That's
before.
right.
It's not a good idea. Don't do it.
Yeah, totally guilty.
Yeah, I have done. I'm like, don't. It's not a good idea. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So these seven are I'm sure for a lot of people not going to be super surprising. Which, a lot of times the simple things are the ones we should pay attention to most. And so the seven are cognition, the way we think, what we tend to focus on. What is our psychology?
Yeah.
Heart is our emotional self. Are we ignoring or supporting our emotional life? A is action. So our habits and routines, both daily, weekly, monthly. Right? N is nourishment. And I define that by the way we move or don't move, how much we're sleeping, and what kind of nutrition our body is getting. So basically our physical experience.
Yep.
What is our nourishment like? G is for guts. And so what's our level of courage to act and be in congruence, like we talked about earlier, Julie? So G is guts. E is environment. And the way I define that is the people, places, and things that we surround ourselves with. And that could be the communities, the friendships, where we spend our time online, what our workplaces are like, all of these environments that we're in. And then finally, S is spirit, which is about belief system. Oh. What is my belief system and how is it impacting my ability to navigate change, both religious and non-religious belief systems. So my belief in the kind of the nature of human existence, as well as my belief in what is possible within my own life.
So fascinating. I love. I mean, I am in alignment with all of these. Immediately, I'm like, can we talk about the spirit one? I think right away.
Great.
I'm curious because I know you said you worked with, and in your past being a psychotherapist, right? With people, all spectrum of different walks of life, be it you said in the hospitals and jail. I'm assuming you've worked with, I know executives, like there's a whole range. I'm curious if there's a connection, if you see a connection with the spirit piece, the belief system, and how people have navigated change and what you've, like maybe some of the wisdom learned, what you've seen across that spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, I think that a few things come to mind. I think about the folks that I've worked with that really had like really strong challenges, some of which in the context of, delusions. So really not clear around like what's real and what's not real.
Wow.
So a belief system that can really impact, moment to moment, how I'm experiencing my life. Right. And seeing success in those people when they shifted their belief around what is possible, knowing that if they took care of themselves physically, if they got enough rest, if they recognized their thinking patterns and were able to kind of make a pivot from obsessing on them, right? So that kind of belief system shows up in folks that really are challenged with it the most. And then even at the corporate level, I was just talking to a client not too long ago, and we've been working together for a number of months. And they were kind of wrestling with this question of, is the work that we're doing, is it working? Right? Do me as the CEO of this company, is this working? And we're having this conversation around, can you hold the belief for at least, the next few weeks, next few months that the work we're doing is going to be effective and you're implementing the strategies that we're talking about, but you're also holding the belief that it will be effective. And then sure enough, just, a few weeks later, she's seeing results and seeing progress and seeing positivity, shifting that belief system just a little bit. So those are some very different examples.
No, that's so great. In terms of those that want, okay, so I'm hearing and imagining those tuning in are like, okay, I have some beliefs that are not serving me.
Right.
How do you teach shifting beliefs? Do you have any thoughts on that specifically? How to change your beliefs? How to, I know myself included, sometimes it's like, I know what I think is possible. This is what I've seen. And how do I get from where I am today to what I would like to be possible? How do you work with that?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in two things. First is like critically evaluating what is the belief. So what's the belief and how is it showing up in my life? How is it operationalizing itself?
Yep.
And that might be through like some journaling exercises.
Yeah.
Right. So first is tracking like what's kind of the current state of existence.
Yeah.
And then my question always is, what are examples and ways you can disrupt that belief?
Great.
Right. And then the same thing, tracking how did I do in effectively disrupting it? and were there challenges in disruption? And I think from a coaching perspective, like that's a great way to create momentum with a client, right? Is because they've got they're building a data set around a goal that they have, and they can come back in and say, okay, here's the data that I collected about myself. And, here's the challenges, here's the successes, and then we can move forward from there. And so, yeah, I'm a big believer in kind of evaluating current state and tracking progress along the way.
I love this. I just want to say, because I know a lot of people that tune in, either if they're not coaches, have worked with coaches, may be familiar with this. And like, honestly, as someone who does that, I just noticed this recently, and I don't know, I'm sure you have this, Michael, like when you're, I know that you're living and breathing this work. I know from our conversations. I just noticed recently I'm looking to expand in a certain way to build a community. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that. And I realized, oh my God, like it doesn't matter how often we work on this. I think it can still come up. And I was like, oh yeah, let me look and see, when have I actually like thought something and then did something different? Or so it like, this is for everybody. And this is something like, I'm taking this, I'm like, yep, I'm going to go put my little limited belief through this washing machine cycle because
Yeah. I love that, and I think that's a really good example of how these various like life dimensions can intersect with each other too, right?
Right.
Because if we want to disrupt a belief system,
Yeah.
like you said, like I want to grow this huge community, but I'm not quite sure, like how can we bring in our environments as a way to support what we want to create, right? Because if we're surrounding ourselves with people and ideas and environments that don't support that kind of big self, and regardless of our belief or our ability to disrupt it, our environment's going to come in and sabotage.
Totally.
Right. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. This intersection of our aspects of our lived experience is so crucial.
Well, and it's bringing in, I'm looking at all of the 7, and one of the, it's so important. I'm thinking of that awesome quote, you're the sum of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. And you're actually extrapolating that to not just people, but also, and I agree, places and things. You kind of alluded to this, social media.
Yeah, exactly.
Where are you in that realm? Like,
That's another exercise I'll do with people if they're interested in examining like a belief system, for instance, is to first try and find places in your life that are supporting that belief system that you don't want anymore. Right. So they're kind of like scanning their various environments to determine, oh, this is a belief that I don't want, but it's actually being supported in all these various places. So maybe I need to remove myself, either virtually or in person, from these various areas that are supporting something I say I don't want in my life anymore. Right.
Oh yeah. I mean, I took out the news and a lot of TV because I'm like, it's not supporting much other than feeling worse about things. I don't want to do that. So I love that.
And, and I think that applies to, not just belief systems, but if we want to, increase our fitness or increase our financial life or improve ourselves emotionally, like look to these other aspects of our lived experience and not just that one dimension. I think we're in this kind of cultural moment right now that looks at, everybody has to have the perfect habits and routines, right? And I am all for it. I am a huge supporter of the daily practice and having really good habits. And if that's all we focus on and our emotional life is a mess and our physical body is a mess, right? And our belief systems are all whacked, then we're going to have a really hard time getting what we want, regardless of our habits are, 100%.
Okay. Amen to that. I don't have any other word other than like, yes and yes. And I'm actually thinking, I know you have a martial arts background and there's so much focus with martial arts. Just my little experience with Taichi and Qigong, just using that internal energy, that life force. I would imagine, because I know you said that you've infused a lot of what you've learned and teach in what you do, the martial arts into this. I would imagine that plays really well into what you just said about doing the inner work connected to your emotions, making sure you're taking care of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done this really fun exercise, and it's a little hard to explain for those that are on audio, but we may be able to experience this next week because we're going to be at this event together, Julie.
I want to hear.
Yeah. So this activity, I'll see if I can explain it. It's basically like a 2-person activity, which is based on an exercise called Taichi push hands. People want to look it up. But it's an exercise. Basically, you're remaining in contact, kind of shoulders to hips with another person, and just trying to like gently push them off balance. So there's no striking, there's no hitting. There's all you're trying to do is get the person to move one foot off balance, and then you kind of reset. So it's a very simple, soft exercise. When I've brought this to corporate groups in the past, it's been framed in the context of communication. And what I mean by that is what people realize, or the feedback that I've gotten from this, is that how they exist in their body is often how they exist in how they communicate with their peers, with those that they lead, et cetera. And I'll give you an example. So I ran this exercise with a group, and I had a woman raise her hand, and she said, she was really moved by it. And she says, you know, I had this realization that in this exercise, my body was so rigid, and I was so tense the whole time. And I had this epiphany that I am so rigid and tense with others all the time. You know, and so I really think she walked away with this realization that, you know, how she communicates needed to shift based on an awareness that was built in her body.
Oh, I love
right.
it.
And you can experience that. I've seen the same thing happen, not just with rigidity, but with another example I had someone report was, you know, I realized through doing this exercise with a few different people that I was just allowing people to like bully me basically, or push me over. And they shared, you know, I can be a real pushover in team meetings when I'm dealing with my supervisor. So their personal interaction or their way of communication was showing up in the way that they move their body, right? And vice versa. Does that make sense?
Oh, I think it's brilliant. And I think for those listening, like, you know, if you don't have someone to do this with, it could also be like just taking stock. Like, do you tend to clench? Do you tend to feel overwhelmed or tight? Or do you tend to be kind of dominant? Like, what I'm hearing is pay attention to your body, your stature, how you stand, how you hold yourself, because that's going to give you a clue to how you communicate.
Absolutely. And if you'd like, I can give an exercise that people could do on their own without a partner.
Yes, please.
And
That's
it's
great.
It's a way to tap into this kind of body awareness component. And it's in my book. It's called the 4 R's. And so the 2 R's people are familiar with, I know you're familiar with too, Julie. It's this idea of reaction or response.
Yep.
So if I said those 2 R's, Julie, what would you say the difference between reaction and response is?
Reaction to me is more involuntary, and it's more out of a place of fear. Response is like I took a pause and I chose. There's choice.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Exactly. Yeah. And that's how I define it. I think most people would agree that that's a fair definition.
Right.
So the challenge in my experience is that idea of, well, I just need to be more responsive. I need to be calm and collected. And when stress gets in my way, I just need to, I need to be cool. Right. That's a great idea, but it doesn't really have any legs on it. It doesn't have any meat on it. Right. So the other 2 R's is where you get the application of this idea. And the other 2 R's are resistance versus relaxation.
Oh, I love it.
So let's play this out for a minute. So Julie, can you remember a time when you had an interaction and you didn't handle it very well and you reacted? Can you just hold it in your mind?
Yeah, plenty of those. Yes.
Okay. So can you describe to me and to us, what did your body feel like in that moment? What are some descriptors?
I felt my stomach felt tight. I just felt icky after. I felt like that wasn't my best. I don't usually get a headache, but I remember just feeling like my head kind of felt cloudy, almost like at the beginning of a headache. Yeah, definitely physiological.
Great. So tight stomach, headache, right? These are all forms of tension.
Yeah.
Right. Resistance. Right. So now when we look at a time when you were really cultivating a really good response, can you think of a time like that when you walked away and you felt, man, I really nailed that one. I was cool, calm, and collected. I killed it. Can you think of a time like that recently or in the last 6 months?
Yeah. I felt like, I just felt really grounded. I felt calm. I felt light. I felt, I felt like a lot. I just felt like things were ease, flow, and light are kind of the words. And I just,
beautiful.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of my throat felt clear, and it's just totally different feeling.
Yeah, exactly. So all of those things you described, clear throat, lighter, these are all relaxed body sensations, right?
I love it.
So back to the tracking that we were talking about a few minutes ago, the exercise, the opportunity for people is to think of times in which they've reacted and track what their body's experienced, and think of times which when they responded and track what their body's experienced, and think about this. Remember this other two R's, resistance versus relaxation, and what that will do if you can spend enough time tracking it. What the result will be is eventually in the midst of a conflict, you'll be able to say, oh, wow, my body is tense, or I have a headache, or my stomach is churning, or my shoulders are tight. And everybody's different, which is why we have to track it, right? Everybody's bodies are different. But eventually what we'll be able to determine is, oh, I feel my shoulders tighten. I need to relax. I need to cool down, because if I don't, I'm going to react instead of respond. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think the gift too is what I've seen in my own life is the more I pay attention to my body response, I can start to get ahead of it before I get into reaction. I have a few people in family situations where I get like that. And I've now learned to get just a few. And I've learned that's so great. Like, okay, my stomach's tightening. But I think for everyone listening, this is I love the 4 R's. I love this. Really, really,
yes,
really great way to
really
do
helpful. Really helpful, I think. And
Awesome.
And to your point, we're always going to have things that trigger us, right? I like this quote that is, if you think you're enlightened, spend 2 weeks with your family. Have you heard that before?
Oh yeah. And I just read that. Everyone's well-intended.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, totally. I'm sure others listening get it. Or there's got to be somebody. Well, life would not be interesting without that. So
that's right.
Oh my God. I love that. No, that's super helpful. Before we wrap up, I do want to talk, and it might have been part of what you just said, but I know one of the areas that you work with individuals and teams around is stress and dealing with stress. And I know that's something most people are dealing with. What do you got to say, Michael, about what you found to really work with stress? Maybe something we haven't touched upon yet.
Sure. Yeah. So it's when we do workshops or we work with teams about this, it's often like a bunch of disappointed faces, because everybody wants to hear like, what's the silver bullet, right? What's the thing I can do? Is it a breathing technique? Is it mindfulness practice? Is it, walking away and taking 30 seconds, right? And there's 100 more strategies that we could discuss, and they're all decent. Right. But in my experience, it's not about the strategy in the moment. It's about cultivating the ability to respond when necessary. Right. And what I mean by that is that in order to be really good at managing stress, we have to really be committed to doing something, in my opinion, at least a few times a week, hopefully daily, that builds that muscle of being able to manage it. So, things like a daily practice, right? A meditation, journaling, exercise, good nutrition, good sleep, all these things that we know have a drastic impact on stress.
Yeah.
Which are more about lifestyle than they are about like the latest fun strategy to apply to the stressful moment.
Yeah, that's really well. And I think it's kind of really, we're talking about, the answer is it's not going to happen in a day. It's got to be a commitment. Yeah. Over time.
Exactly. Now I will also say though, that if people are committed and, if you can build a practice over time, things can drastically change.
Yeah.
And our ability to, respond versus react can drastically be different. But yeah, just like everything, it requires practice. It requires kind of building that muscle.
So great. Yeah, it's just really good. I'm one of those people that needs to hear that every single day. That's why I think
Me too.
Yeah, every day I'm like, oh yeah, I'm still practicing. Okay. Every now and then. Yeah, which kind of goes to the whole, you talked about with the changes. A for action is about habits and routine. So I can see how everything fits into the 7 aspects for changes. Really, I love this.
Awesome.
And I'm going to make sure to have this all written out so people can I think it's a great, like even just a 1-pager, write out these, the different, the acronym and what they mean. And just, are you connected to that every day?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a good opportunity. And the other thing I would say about that is that, depending on where we're at in any given day or phase of our life, we may have to look at one of the 7 versus another, right? Like 1 month, it might be, I really need to look at my emotional self. And the next year it might be, my habits and routines are really, need some optimization. And so I just invite people to, continue to evaluate these various aspects of our lived experience.
It's awesome. Well, before we end, I just wanted to check in. Is there anything else that's like right there for you that you want to share? Maybe I didn't ask you or thought that came to you. I always like to ask that because oftentimes there's like the last nugget of wisdom that I don't want to miss.
Sure. I would say, I think any kind of change that we're experiencing, whether it be, really intense personal change or just a career change, something more on the professional side, to, give ourselves patience and empathy in the process.
Yeah.
I don't think we're naturally wired to be good at change as humans.
Yeah.
And I also believe we can get better at it, right? And that's the invitation, is that we can build our ability to be adaptable, but just like everything else requires practice. And so because that requirement of practice, the invitation is to have empathy and patience while we build that new skill set.
I love it. Oh, this is so great. I thank you so much. I definitely just, if you're watching, here is Michael's book, Changes, which is a really awesome yellow cover with like trees one way and the other way to show roots and then growth, I believe.
Yeah,
And
you got it.
he also has cards, which I love, that go with the 7 different types of the aspects of change. We went through them, which are fantastic. I've gone through those. And thank you for just sharing so much wisdom. This is an area I know I hear a lot from people that are listening, that dealing with change, dealing with stress. How do you do that successfully? What's possible? Changing beliefs, all of the things that we talked about. Such great information. Really, really appreciate you sharing and being here
Yeah,
today.
thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's some important stuff. And yeah, I appreciate connecting with you today.